Okay, look. I'm staring at the charts this morning and I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. We need to unpack this immediately.
What are you saying?
The market is just doing something that, frankly, doesn't make any sense on the surface. We've got the darlings of the last few years.
Oh, the big tech names.
Yeah, the AI superstars, everything everyone owns, and they're seeing what analysts are calling violent selling. Just ugly. And yet, the Dow is hitting new all-time highs. It's touching 50,000.
It creates a kind of cognitive dissonance, doesn't it?
Totally.
You look at one screen, it looks like a crash. You look at the other, and it's a booming bull market.
Exactly. It's a total vibe shift. I mean, usually the rule is simple. When tech sneezes, the whole market catches a cold.
That's been the rule for a decade.
But this time, the market seems to have found immunity in the most boring places possible. We're talking about tractors and box stores holding the line.
That is precisely what we need to analyze today. We've got this massive stack of financial reports, technical charts, economic forecasts right here.
So what's the mission?
The mission is to figure out the narrative underneath. We need to answer a few key questions, Is the AI trade actually dead, or is it just resting?
Okay.
Why are people in Japan standing in line for 6 hours, literally 6 hours, to buy physical gold? And why might the old economy, I'm talking trains, freight, stuff you can kick, why might that be the next massive wealth generator?
It sounds like we are witnessing the revenge of the old economy. But before we get to the trains and the gold bars, let's start with the big picture, the macro view.
Good idea.
Because for a while now, there's been this constant drumbeat of recession is coming, recession is coming.
Yeah.
But looking at the data in these reports, it doesn't really look like a standard recession.
No, and that's where all the confusion comes from.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the headline GDP numbers, the overall economy looks fine. But if you peel back the layers, we've actually been living through what some are calling a rolling recession.
A rolling recession. Break that down for me. Is that like a recession that just moves from house to house?
In a way, yeah, but think of it moving from sector to sector instead of the whole economy collapsing at once like in '08.
Right.
Specific industries have been taking turns being in a depression. Specifically for the last few years, we're looking at manufacturing, housing, and transportation.
Right.
They have been absolutely beaten down.
So while we're all playing around with chatbots, the factories were just collecting dust.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
While services and tech were partying. But the sources we have today are suggesting that the music is changing.
Okay, so what are we seeing?
We are finally seeing what economists call green shoots. Look at manufacturing. The ISM and Chicago PMI readings just came out.
Okay, pause. ISM and Chicago PMI. I see these acronyms all the time. In plain English, what are they actually measuring?
Good catch. So ISM is the Institute for Supply Management. It's basically a survey of purchasing managers, the people at factories who order all the raw materials.
The people on the front lines.
Exactly. If the number is below 50, it means they're contracting, ordering less stuff because business is bad. If it's above 50, they're expanding. For a long time, this number was in the dumps. Suddenly, it popped above 50.
So the people who actually buy the steel and the microchips are starting to pick up the phone again.
That's it. And that was a huge surprise to the analysts. It signals the inventory cycle has turned. Companies have finally sold off all that excess stuff they hoarded, and now they actually need to make things again.
And I'm guessing that links directly to transportation, because if you make a widget, you have to move the widget.
They're joined at the hip. Freight and railroads are showing life after 3 years of what the industry itself called a depression. Volume is ticking up.
But you said there were 3 sectors. What about housing?
Right. And this is important. Housing is the outlier here.
Housing usually leads us out of recessions, though, right?
Right.
Everyone buys a house, buys furniture, buys paint.
Usually, yes. But the data here suggests housing is just stuck in the mud. The forecasts in this stack suggest it likely won't bounce back until 2027. Interest rates are still doing their damage there. But manufacturing and transportation, they are moving right now.
Okay, so we have a split economy, but what about earnings? Because the headlines are screaming panic, but when I look at the actual reports, are companies losing money?
That's the irony. The earnings picture is actually robust. Analysts are expecting, about 13% growth by Q4? And here's the key point on that anxiety you mentioned.
Go on.
There was a massive fear narrative that AI would wipe out software earnings. The story was, AI replaces software, so sell your SaaS stocks.
Right, why pay for a subscription when an AI agent can just code it for you?
Precisely. But looking at companies like ServiceNow and Palantir, the data just doesn't show that. They aren't guiding lower. They aren't saying, oh no, our customers are leaving.
So the earnings apocalypse never
It
happened.
just hasn't materialized.
So the fundamentals are solid, companies are making money, but the stock prices, the actual price action, is telling a totally different story. And this brings us back to that flip we talked about. The Dow at 50,000 while the Nasdaq struggles. Who specifically is driving this bus?
It's the companies you buy from every day. The physical world. Caterpillar is the standout example here.
The yellow bulldozers.
The yellow bulldozers. The stock has doubled over the last year.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me a heavy equipment manufacturer is performing like a prime-time tech stock? That feels wrong.
It feels wrong if you're stuck in the 2024 mindset. But think about what we just said about manufacturing infrastructure. If you're rebuilding the industrial base, you need machines.
Right.
So Caterpillar, Walmart, Johnson & Johnson, Chevron, Boeing, money is rotating out of the cloud and into the ground.
And on the flip side, the losers list reads like a who's who of last bull run.
Salesforce, Microsoft, Amazon, NVIDIA, they're all showing weakness, or as we noted, violent selling. And there's a canary in the coal mine here that we need to pay attention to regarding risk appetite.
Bitcoin.
Oh, interesting. I feel like Bitcoin usually moves with the vibes.
Yeah.
If people are feeling risky, they buy crypto and tech.
That's the correlation. And right now, Bitcoin has failed to hold key levels. It's struggling. And this gets really risky when you look at a company like MicroStrategy.
They're the ones who basically turn their company into a Bitcoin ETF, right?
Pretty much. They hold around 750,000 Bitcoin. But here's the math problem. Their average buy price is up around $76,000.
Oof. So if Bitcoin dips below that?
They are effectively underwater on a massive leveraged position. That creates a lot of structural shakiness in that tech-adjacent space. If they get a margin call or have to sell, it spirals.
Meanwhile, while the digital gold Bitcoin is struggling, actual energy is having a moment. Energy is having a massive moment. Oil prices didn't hit the downside targets many expected. They're creeping up. And energy stocks like Exxon and Chevron have seen a year's worth of gains in just over a month. Exxon is up around 20% recently.
That's a huge move.
That is in retail traders on their phones. That is massive institutional money flowing in.
Speaking of gold and hard assets, this is probably the most bizarre part of the research pile today. There is a huge debate going on about whether gold is in a bubble.
And it seems like the answer depends entirely on your zip code.
What do you mean?
It really does. This is a classic agree to disagree scenario between the East and the West. If you look at the U.S. market, the argument is no bubble.
Why not?
Because American investors aren't buying the gold ETFs yet. They're still chasing Bitcoin or trying to catch the falling knife in tech stocks. The enthusiasm just isn't there in New York or Chicago.
But then you look internationally, and it's absolute mania.
It is. The behavior in Asia and Europe is driving this. The sources detailed a story about a woman in Japan that really stopped me in my tracks. She waited in line for 6 hours.
6 hours? For what? A concert?
To buy gold bars. Physical gold bars. And eventually she just gave up because the demand was so high, the shop couldn't process people fast enough.
Okay, play devil's advocate here. 6 hours in line to swap your yen for a piece of metal. That feels like bubble behavior. That feels like panic buying.
It's classic mania, yes. When you have retail investors physically lining up for hours to exchange currency for metal, that's not investing. That's fear of debasement.
People losing faith in their currency.
Exactly. And technically, gold went parabolic, hitting 5,000. But the chart suggests that move might be overextended.
Well, if people are lining up for 6 hours, how can the price go down?
Supply and demand, right?
In the physical market, yes. But in the paper market, the futures market, where the price is set, it looks exhausted. We could see a severe liquidation back down to the $4,000 level.
So a $1,000 drop, that would crush anyone who just bought at the top. It would be a brutal washout. And silver is even scarier.
Silver tends to be the wild child of the precious metals family.
It's incredibly illiquid compared to gold. It's volatile. It saw massive drops recently, crashing right down to the 50-day moving average. It's dangerous territory.
So what's the play? Avoid it all.
Well, if you want to play this theme without buying the metal itself and risking that drop, the miners offer a really interesting value proposition.
Like the company's actually digging this stuff up.
Exactly. Companies like Newmont or Bear Gold. Here's the logic. Even if gold prices pull back from $5,000 to $4,000, these companies are digging it out of the ground for way less than that.
So their margins are huge.
At these levels, they're generating record free cash flow. If gold stabilizes, the miners look like a very attractive value play compared to the overvalued tech sector.
Okay, so let's tackle the elephant in the room. The sector that everyone listening likely owns and is currently freaking out about, the state of AI. With the big names dropping, we have to ask, is the boom over or are we done?
The short answer from the data is no. But the easy money phase is over. We are transitioning
Transitioning to what?
from the infrastructure phase to the application phase.
Infrastructure versus application. Break that down. What does that actually look like?
Okay, think of the internet in the late 90s. First, you had to lay the fiber optic cables and build the servers. That was Cisco and Intel.
That's the infrastructure.
Right. In AI, that's been NVIDIA and the data center builders. We are still in the early innings of that, but the market has priced it to perfection.
So everyone knows we need chips. That trade is crowded.
Very crowded. But the application phase, where companies actually use this stuff to make money and improve productivity, that hasn't even really started yet. We're talking about AI agents that can automatically negotiate supply chain contracts or code entire software suites overnight.
That's where the real value is.
That value creation is coming, but it's harder to see right now.
I liked the analogy one of the analysts used regarding software, because there's this fear that AI will just replace software companies, but the report says AI eats software and software eats the world.
It's a great line. It means AI is an enhancement, not a replacement. It's the engine inside the car. It makes the software more valuable because it can do more.
So if the software is getting better, why are the stocks dropping? Why is Salesforce getting beaten up?
Cognitive dissonance and CapEx.
CapEx, capital expenditures.
Right. You have companies showing double-digit growth. Fundamentally, they are healthy. But investors look at the balance sheet and see billions of dollars going out the door to buy these AI chips.
And investors hate spending. They want dividends and buybacks.
They want immediate returns.
Yeah.
They see the spending and they ask, where's the profit from this? It creates anxiety. But for the long-term investor, this drop is likely just profit-taking, not a fundamental collapse of the technology.
It's a show me the money moment. The market is tired of promises. He wants to see the cash. This brings us to a really practical part of our discussion today. We have a couple of portfolio case studies from the source material. These are real listener portfolios that were analyzed, and I think the lessons here apply to almost everyone.
These were really eye-opening. The first one was a listener named Wakwas, and his portfolio was a masterclass in the dangers of concentration.
What was he holding?
He had over 50% of his entire portfolio in Canadian banks.
Wow.
Royal Bank of Canada, Toronto Dominion, banks like that.
Now, to be fair, if you're Canadian, those are like the bedrock of the economy, and they've had a great run recently.
They have. They doubled recently, which is almost unheard of for boring bank stocks. But that's exactly the trap.
How so?
You cannot expect a utility-like bank stock to double again next year. Having half your net worth in one specific sector of one specific country is incredibly risky. If the Canadian housing market sneezes, his entire portfolio catches pneumonia.
So what's the fix? Do you just sell it all and pay the taxes?
You don't have to sell it all, but you have to trim the winners. The strategy here is to take your principal off the table, sell enough to get back the money you originally invested and let the house money ride.
Okay.
Then you take that cash and reallocate into sectors you don't own. In his case, he had zero exposure to consumer staples or energy. And as we just discussed, energy is where the momentum is shifting.
Then there's the second portfolio, Runjeet. He only held 7 stocks.
7 stocks. And almost all of them were tech. It was basically a Magnificent 7 proxy portfolio.
Which is great when tech is up and terrifying when tech is down.
Exactly. He's riding a roller coaster with no seatbelt. He needs balance. The advice there was to look at the boring stuff we talked about, nuclear and uranium plays, or industrials.
Something that zigs when tech zags.
You need that.
All right, let's get to the part everyone waits for, the actionable ideas. Based on this rotation into the old economy, the sources highlighted 2 very specific, very different stock picks.
Let's start with the old economy pick. The ticker is WOBWOBTech.
WOBTech sounds like a tech company, but it's definitely not.
No, it stands for Westinghouse Air Brake Technologies. This is a railroad equipment company. They make locomotives, braking systems, freight equipment.
And this ties back to the transportation depression ending.
This company is the proof. They just announced a landmark deal with Union Pacific worth $1.2 billion.
That is a massive contract, and Union Pacific isn't spending that kind of money for fun.
Exactly. It signals that the major railroads are finally spending money again to upgrade their fleets because they expect more shipping demand. Wabtec is an old-school industrial stock with mid to high single-digit sales growth. It's not flashy, but it's riding a macro trend.
I love that. It fits perfectly with the manufacturing rebound data. Now, the second pick is, well, it's about as far away from railroads as you can get. A company called Revolve Group, ticker RVLV.
This is for the millennial and Gen Z demographic. Revolve is a high-end digital fashion retailer. They use an army of influencers to sell very expensive clothes.
I was looking at the notes on this. They sell $500 hockey sweaters in this economy. Who is buying a $500 hockey sweater?
Apparently, enough people to drive massive margins.
Hmm.
And that's the key. The analysts aren't just looking at sales volume, they are looking at how much money the company keeps.
Yeah.
Revolve recently beat earnings expectations significantly, and it was driven by their margins going up 350 basis points.
That means they are becoming much more efficient. They aren't just discounting to move product.
Correct. And they are quietly gaining massive market share in China. They're up 50% year over year in that market. Now here's where the technicals come in. The chart shows the stock is in an accumulation zone.
Accumulation zone. Explain that like I'm five.
It means the stock price is trading sideways. It's not spiking up or crashing down, but the volume of trading is high. It's usually a sign that big institutions, the whales, are quietly buying up shares without trying to spook the price higher yet.
So what's the target?
If it can hold above the $20 level, the chart suggests it could target $54. That's a huge potential upside.
So we have a railroad giant moving freight and a high-fashion retailer selling to Gen Z in China. That is a diversified watch list right there.
It really covers the bases, value and growth.
So bringing this all together, what is the big takeaway here? It feels like the easy mode of just buy tech and sleep is turned off.
That's the perfect way to put it. The market is rotating. The easy money in tech is pausing. It's forcing investors to actually do the work and look at the unloved sectors: rail, energy, gold miners.
It's moving from a speculation market driven by hype and vibes to a show me the money market.
Real contracts, like
Yeah.
that Union Pacific deal.
Yeah.
Real dividends, real cash flow. That is what is going to get rewarded in the second half of this year.
And before we wrap up, there is one thought from the research that I haven't been able to shake. It's about that divergence between the U.S. investor and the global investor regarding gold.
It is a provocative thought to end on.
Hmm.
You have U.S. investors largely ignoring gold, chasing Bitcoin and tech, thinking the dollar is king.
Meanwhile, the rest of the world is lining up for physical bars.
And the source hinted that the U.S. dollar might be weakening fundamentally.
If the dollar weakens, does the American investor suddenly wake up and realize they're holding the wrong asset?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question. If the psychology shifts in the U.S. and they join the global rush for commodities, we could see moves that make the current volatility look tame.
The line for gold might not just be in Tokyo.
It might be in New York.
A sobering thought to end on. As always, take a look at your own portfolio. If you look like a Canadian bank ETF or a tech proxy, maybe it's time to think about some rails and gold. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.